Okay, Al, so first question for you is when somebody calls up and they say that their pressure washer has no flow or no pressure, what would be the first things you start to check?
Okay, with low pressure or no pressure, you'd want to go out and make sure that you have fluid coming through the nozzle. If you have enough fluid going through the nozzle and they're saying low pressure, it's a possibility that the nozzle is worn. It can be worn from two different standpoints. One, just from the friction of the water moving through the orifice, or a lot of times nozzles are abused by being hit on the ground, which could open up the orifice and make it run at a lower pressure. Low pressure can be found in worn or damaged valves. Here you have the valve poppet, and here you have the valve seat. The poppet has various pits along the sealing surface, as well as the valve seat on its sealing surface has pits. Those will not allow the valve to close tightly and form a good seal. So the water will be leaking by, and thus you'll have low pressure. Another source of low pressure is worn or damaged seals. In this case, these are high pressure seals. You have damage on the outside of this particular seal that's caused by a movement, a physical movement up and down in the cylinder, and possibly an overpressurization or a high spike scenario to actually crush the seal a little bit and allowing it to move. In this particular case here, you have a cavitation damage in this seal. It's going to allow the water to slide by the seal instead of trying to go out through the valves. This will all affect your pressure because it will cut back on the amount of flow going out the nozzle. Another source of low pressure is the discharge hose and spray gun. These seem to have the most abuse of anything. They're dragged on the ground, they're thrown on the ground. If you have any leaks coming out of the hose, out of the fittings, you're going to see a pressure drop in your system. Yet another area where you can have low pressure is through your unloader or your regulator. These are wear items. You have pistons that are moving up and down, you have ball and seat assembly in the bottom. You will get wear through those areas because of friction from the water bypassing, and once you start getting slippage by your ball and your seat in these unloaders, the water has an easier path to travel through the bypass instead of going out the nozzle. Therefore, you don't have the adequate flow through the nozzle. You're not going to achieve your pressure. Inlet strainers are another area where you can restrict your water flow going in. Therefore, it will affect your pressure going out. You want to regularly inspect your filters to make sure they're clean. They can get dirty very easily, as you can see with this one right here, and this will slow down your water flow. Another example of low pressure would be improperly sealed fittings. If you don't properly seal the threads on the fittings, there's potential for air to be sucked into the fittings, and therefore you get a cavitation. You don't have a full cylinder, therefore you're not going of fluid, therefore you're not going to have full pressure achieved downstream. As you can see here, that this fitting is a tapered pipe thread. If it's not tightened correctly, there's slop to it and air can get through that port. Okay, another source of low pressure for having a fouled valve. In this case, you can see that there's a piece of debris that's hung up in the valve that will not allow the valve to close, therefore you cannot generate any type of pressure. One other source for low pressure could possibly be a defective pressure gauge. Make sure that the gauge is running accurately. Another possibility of low pressure would be belt slippage if you have a belt drive unit. You have to have X amount of tension on this belt so that it doesn't slip over the pulley. In order to get flow in the pump, it relies on RPM for a given bore and stroke. And if you have slippage on the pulley, you'll not achieve that RPM, therefore you won't have your flow, therefore you're not going to have your pressure.